All right, let's jump right in. For the longest time, the world of global business felt, well, kind of predictable, right? It was the straight line of more and more globalization. But that line, it's completely shattered. So today, we're pulling together some incredible insights from a major global colloquium to build a clear guide for navigating this new, fractured world, from really understanding the risks to building that durable resilience we all need. Professor Mervyn King just nails the sense of shock we're all feeling. I mean, who would have thought the reliable, globalized world that so many of us built our careers on has just changed? It's given way to something way more complex, more restrictive, and things like trade tensions and weaponized tariffs, they're not just headlines anymore. They're fundamentally rewriting the rules of the game, and let's be honest, they're increasing the cost of living for everybody. So, what are we really talking about here? Michelle Mullen gives us this perfectly clear definition. Geo-economic risk, it's not politics over here and economics over there. No, it's that specific point where a geopolitical tension directly creates an economic consequence. That's the new landscape. That's the world we're all trying to figure out right now. And that brings us to our first big idea here, and a formal welcome, I guess, to what experts are calling the fractured world. It's a term that just perfectly captures this breakdown of all the old certainties and the rise of these new, totally unpredictable divisions. And living in this new reality, it demands a completely new way of thinking about risk. This right here is the absolute crux of it. Think about it. A few years ago, a decision about where to get your supplies was all about cost, quality, logistics. Simple. Today, it's about geopolitical alignments. It's about which countries are friends and which aren't. This massive shift is forcing companies everywhere to make huge changes, diversifying supply chains so they're not dependent on one single country, localizing production to bring things closer to home, and just completely tearing up and rethinking their entire approach to risk management. So, okay, the world is fractured. What does that actually mean for us, day in and day out? This isn't some abstract idea, some distant thunder. As Dr. Reuel Khosa put it so powerfully, geoeconomic risk is the storm at our doorstep. It's here, right now, and it's creating a whole new set of very specific challenges that we've got to get our heads around. A really smart way to think about these risks is to look at two different types of trends. Michelle Mullen suggests we track both. On one hand, you've got the soft trends. These are the immediate, flashy, headline-grabbing issues like trade disputes and shifting alliances. But then you've also got to track the hard trends. These are the unstoppable forces moving under the surface. Things like huge demographic shifts, the incredible pace of AI, and this tangled, fragmented map of global regulations. The real danger? It's getting so caught up in the daily waves that we miss the massive, deep currents that are fundamentally changing the ground right under our feet. So, to get a real handle on what business leaders are actually worried about, we can look at the Risk in Focus report. And this is not some small little survey. We're talking about input from over 4,000 chief audit executives and board members from all over the world. It gives us this incredible, data-driven snapshot of what's really going on in boardrooms right now. And what they found? Well, it's pretty darn clear. It paints a vivid picture of what's keeping leaders up at night. The top two risks are the same, no matter where you look in the world: cybersecurity and the massive disruption from AI and digital tech. And right behind that is the growing challenge of finding and keeping good people. These aren't just abstract fears, They are the clear and present dangers that are defining what risk looks like today. Okay, so we've defined the problem, we've mapped out the biggest risks. Now we're at a real turning point in this whole conversation. Because it's not enough to just point at the storm clouds, right? We have to figure out how to navigate through them. And that requires a totally new kind of leadership, a new call for something called stewardship. This is the big question, isn't it? When all the old maps are useless and the seas are getting rough, how do you lead your organization not just to survive, but to actually come out stronger on the other side? It really takes a fundamental shift in how we think about leadership itself. And here it is, the core idea, put so powerfully by Dr. Reuel Khosa. See, management is often about reacting. It's about keeping the systems running. Stewardship is something different. It's proactive. It's about taking deep personal responsibility for the long-term health and really the integrity of the institution you're leading, especially when things get tough. So what does stewardship actually look like in practice? Well, Dr. Khosa breaks it down into two key things. First, there's moral imagination.
That's the ability to see beyond the next quarter's profits and really consider the ethical consequences of your decisions. And second, there's strategic resolve. That's just having the courage, the guts, to make the hard, right choices for the long haul, even when they're not popular, all because they're rooted in integrity.
Okay, so this idea of stewardship is great, but how do we make it real? How do we turn that philosophy into action? The next step is all about building a practical toolkit for resilience, outlining the frameworks that leaders can actually put to use. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. This data from Stacey K shows something fascinating. On the left, you've got what businesses say are their biggest risks. No surprise, cybersecurity, AI, and human capital are at the top. But look at the right. That's where internal audit teams are actually spending their time. Do you see the gaps? Digital disruption and human capital are rated way higher as risks than they are as audit priorities. There's a real disconnect there. And that misalignment? It shows you exactly where organizations are most vulnerable. You just can't have different teams looking at risk in their own little silos anymore. This is why there's an urgent need for what's called a combined assurance model. Simply put, it just means getting your internal audit, compliance, and risk management folks all in the same room, looking at the same map, and working together to protect the entire organization from its biggest strategic threats. So here's the game plan, the actionable pillars for building real resilience. First, it starts at the top. The board has to embed geopolitical scenario planning right into the heart of its strategy. Second, the finance profession needs to step up and act as connectors, breaking down those silos and integrating all the different views on risk. And third, internal audit has to be the one to drive that combined assurance model, making sure its work is perfectly aligned with the company's biggest strategic threats. So, as we start to bring this all together, we need to lift our eyes up from just the tools and processes. In a world that's so defined by uncertainty and, well, fragmentation, what's the one guiding principle that should steer every single decision? It all comes down to one word: trust. Dr. Khosa grounds this whole idea in the profound African philosophy of Ubuntu. It's this beautiful concept that reminds us that our own humanity is tied up in the humanity of everyone else. It means that even in a fractured world, we are all connected. And recognizing that interdependence, that's not weakness. That is the ultimate source of wisdom and strength. It's really the human foundation for leading today. And that brings us to the ultimate takeaway, which Michelle Mullen captures in this perfect metaphor. When the world is volatile, when the path forward is foggy and unclear, the most critical asset any organization has is its compass. And trust, transparency, and unwavering ethical leadership, that has to be our North Star. It has to guide every single thing we do. So, let's end with a challenge, a question for you to take back to your team. Take an honest look at your organization. Is it simply reacting to the waves, just trying to manage the storm as it hits? Or is it proactively learning to steward the ship, guided by a clear moral compass and a long-term vision for a truly resilient future? Because the difference between those two approaches, that will define who succeeds in this fractured world.